Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Graytech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Thomas van Haren. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Ecovative, where he is responsible for the mycelium, composites, and raw materials business lines across the United States and Europe. Ecovative's composites products are focused on replacing single-use plastic for applications ranging from packaging to construction materials. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Thanks, Todd. Nice to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So how'd you get into this industry and the mycelium world more specifically?
Yeah, my path into the mycelium world has been, I would say, a non-traditional path. I actually have a background in banking. I worked in banking for almost a decade. And when I just was sick and tired of working in finance, I decided to go back to school. And so I went to business school here in New York at Columbia. And then through a connection was introduced to the founders of Ecovative, Evan Beyer and Gavin McIntyre. And eventually they brought me on to lead the composites business and eventually also the raw materials business. So yeah, it's been a non-traditional path compared to other people who work in the mycelium space.
Yeah. So what spoke to you to pull you over?
I think the great thing about Ecovative is that they are bringing alternative materials to market that are truly sustainable, that actually don't have plastics in it, and that are really going to make a difference in the world. Whether it's on a packaging, whether it's with our packaging materials, or with our bacon and our vegan leather and foam. I think those are all really excellent products that will truly have the opportunity to make a difference. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to be a part of that.
Very cool. Very cool. So you guys were spotlighted during Autodesk University on the main stage for your work with the Project Venus and its mission to kind of revolutionize sustainable housing. As a quick recap, can you give the listeners kind of a high level overview of what Project Phoenix is?
So Project Phoenix is an affordable housing development in Oakland, California. That a consortium of companies are working on that include obviously Autodesk, MBH Architects, Factory OS, who is an offsite builder of modular housing, as well as Chrysler and Associates, who make FRP facade panels. And so Ecovative was brought in by David Benjamin, who is a long-standing supporter and innovator in the architect/mycelium space. About 10 years ago, he actually did an installation at the MoMA PS1 in Queens, New York, where he built a large tower using our mycelium bricks. And so he's been involved in the mycelium space as well as in the architecture world for a long time. And so he brought that whole group together to develop a carbon neutral or even a carbon negative facade to this building project. So yeah, we're really excited to be a part of that.
That's awesome. So for those who don't know, what is a mycelium brick and how do you go about using that?
Yeah. We actually don't use mycelium bricks for this, but let me kind of take a few steps back. So mycelium is the root structure of mushrooms. Obviously in a traditional mushroom growing setting, the mycelium grows in the substrate and eventually it pins into a mushroom. Ecovative has found ways to use mycelium in different ways. For our bacon and leather and foam products, we grow 100% mycelium slabs that we then harvest and treat into these alternative materials. But actually, the first product that Ecovative brought to market about 15 years ago, actually, was a way to use mycelium as a binding agent, as a glue for agricultural waste products. And so you can use it as a replacement for styrofoam or other EPS foams. And so, yeah, with our bricks, that is one product that we use this technology for. But we're primarily focused on packaging and now on these sandwich core panels. So, look at it as if you have a facade panel, that will be filled up with EPS or, kind of a styrofoam, which is the brand name, obviously, but, an EPS material or
Mm.
polyiso material. You can use mycelium-based cores for that. We use a hemp hurd, which is a high carbon sequestering material. And if you use that material, you get to a final carbon negative position rather than obviously a highly carbon positive position when you use a petroleum-based product like styrofoam or polyiso.
Yeah. Interesting. So, what kind of inspires you guys to partner on the Project Phoenix journey, and kind of what were your goals in that? And then we'll drill more into the mycelium and the ins and outs of that here in a second.
Yeah, again, so what brought us there was really David Benjamin's vision and leadership. He really is the driving force behind that and bringing all those parties together. At Ecovative we joke sometimes that we are the world's leading manufacturer of building and construction materials using mycelium, but we don't actually have a product out in the market. And the reason why that is because when Ecovative was founded, we had initially focused on packaging and building materials, but 10, 15 years ago, people were not looking at, weren't jumping up and down for sustainable materials like that
Mm.
as they are today. And so, throughout the years, we pivoted into a different direction. For example, in our bacon and leather and foam products, and had kept the composites business going, but with less of a focus than we are right now.
Hmm.
And David brought that really back to the table, where he saw a direct line of sight of a replacement of a petroleum-based product with a mycelium product. And I think the core, the core product actually is a really good place to start for a mycelium product. You don't have any of the issues with structural integrity, or it's not a load bearing product, right? But instead, you perform either in a rain screen or from a little bit more of an acoustic performance. You can play a really important role with our material.
Mm. Very cool. Why do you think it's making waves as a building material now, and that it's kind of picking up the momentum and steam?
Yeah, that's a good question. Especially in Europe, we see a lot of interest and a lot of innovators using mycelium or wanting to use mycelium as a building material. And I think part of that is just government policies are really pushing innovators and entrepreneurs to look at different, more sustainable materials.
Mm.
A lot of governments in Europe have obviously committed to certain carbon emission goals between now and 2050 generally, and they come to find that actually with the building plans that they have to tackle housing shortage, there's a mismatch between what they can emit between now and 2050 and the amount of housing and new structures that are required. And so there's this mismatch between goals of carbon emission and goals of housing that is required. And so people are being forced almost to find other better materials. And yeah, we see a really big uptick in that, especially in Europe. We actually recently announced the open patent program for Europe, the UK, and Israel, where we are opening up the core mycelium composites patent in those geographies for entrepreneurs to use freely. And the reason why we did that is because we saw a big uptake in interest in those markets of people who want to experiment it, not just in packaging, which is kind of the traditional focus of mycelium composites, but in especially in the construction industry as well. In the past, we have licensed that out to individual parties or entrepreneurs in those regions, but we felt that we could trigger more innovation and a wider scale adaptation of the material if we would take kind of the barriers to entry down and allow anyone to use it. And so, yeah, we're really excited about that. We want to play a role in that industry by supplying raw materials, so spawn, the seed from which the mushroom grows, and or substrate out of our plant that we acquired in the Netherlands. And so, yeah, we're planning to make available material at the lowest cost possible so that as many people as possible can use this material and innovate with it and bring sustainable materials to the market.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long does the process take to develop one of the bricks, or to have enough really to go out to the job site?
You mean how long does it take to grow one piece of of mycelium based, for example, a brick or a
Yeah,
core?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
depending on the strength you're looking for and depending on the size of the panel, right,
Hmm.
that could be different. But let's take a brick as an example, right? If you think about a traditional sized brick, that will grow and self-assemble in 4 days in 5 days in a mold. And then once you take it out of the mold, you let it overgrow for one more day, and then you bake it off to kill the organism, and then you have a ready-made product. So it takes kind of 5 to 6 days from start to finish.
Wow, it's
Yeah,
pretty quick.
it's pretty quick. Yeah, nature has some really amazing properties for us, and yeah, mycelium is an amazing product that does all these things by itself, right? You let the mycelium grow into these agricultural waste products, and so the knife cuts on both sides.
Yeah. Do you need a special like covering to go on the outside of it, or does that impact the um, carbon neutral aspect of it?
On the final product, you mean?
Correct.
No, no, you don't. You don't. I mean, like, it would not be a great idea, although people have done it, to build structures that have exposure to the elements, directly onto mycelium, right? I
Uh,
don't think people have built little structures out in the woods using mycelium panels or bricks, and that works. But obviously, there's other issues with that. That cannot be a mechanism to actually replace traditional bricks. We look at it much more from a perspective of it's an additional product where you can, for example, replace um, uh, insulation, right? So insulation that's used with petroleum based, that's made with petroleum based products,
mhm.
you can replace those pretty effectively using mycelium based materials. Same thing for example, a sandwich panel. So yeah, obviously there's other products, other things you can do with it, like acoustic panels, for example, is a really good example of a product that's usually made with an EPS type of foam, and
Mhm.
you can simply replace that with mycelium based material.
Yeah, very cool. Is there something that you'd want to tell the world about mycelium that maybe they don't know, or there's a misconception out there?
I don't think there's necessarily a misconception about mycelium. I think there is, um, people think it's an easy product to use, and in a way it is, right? Like everyone can, in their backyard or in their garage or in their kitchen, grow some pieces of mycelium composites, right? That's really not very difficult. We actually sell both in the US and in Europe what we call our GIY bags. It's a grow it yourself, it's a play on obviously DIY, it's a grow it yourself kit that people can experiment with at home and grow materials using our substrate. Um, that is different though from growing, for example, construction materials at scale, right? Like if you want to grow construction materials at scale, pricing is going to be incredibly difficult. And what I tell to every single person and every single company who reaches out about our open patent program, for example, everyone wants to also make their own substrate. And I give everyone the advice not to do that, right? Like Ecovative has 15 years of experience in which strain to use. We have our own proprietary strain that we are now making spawn with in our plant in the Netherlands. We know which substrates work well. We've tested, over 100 different substrates for this specific application.
Hmm.
And so for people to start reinventing the wheel there, I think is a bad idea. Instead, what I would tell the world is try to figure out a way to make large mycelium panels that can be cost competitive with incumbent products in the construction industry and focus on that production process. Really focus on how do I get the highest quality product at the largest scale possible. And once you find that, that's when you have a real opportunity to enter the market and compete with incumbent products that are not great for the environment. So I think if I would give any advice to, large and small businesses out there, is to focus on that production system. How do I
Mm,
scale this appropriately?
mm. Interesting. So, what are some of the, let's drill into the potential benefits of mycelium-based construction materials in terms of kind of the energy efficiency, the cost effectiveness, and just overall impact on sustainability.
Right. In addition to that, our mycelium products, our mycelium-based composites, have really pretty good insulation performance. The R value can be comparable to traditional materials, but you might need slightly more of it, right? Like that's why adaptation in the American market will be more difficult than it is in the European market, because in the European market, walls generally have some more space for more material to get in there as insulation material, and therefore compete with a traditional product. So yeah, I think from an acoustics perspective, it's also comparative to incumbent products, and yeah, I think there's definitely some more research to be done there. But it has some really amazing properties of itself, right? So mycelium is naturally hydrophobic, is naturally fire resistant, and there's a lot of ways to go with that.
Yeah, very cool. Do you see it picking up steam more in the US to try to compete with our European friends?
Yeah, yeah, I think there's definitely a long way to go, but I see a real shift, right?
Mm,
Like at Autodesk University, there was a lot of interest in the module that Autodesk and Factory OS put there in collaboration with Chrysler and MBH. It was really the talk of the town, and a lot of people are very, very interested in how are we actually going to do this together, right? Like
mm,
what are the barriers for this to be implemented at scale? And I think if a group like that actually shows leadership, it doesn't just look at the immediate cost impact, because yeah, if you're going to compare today a cheap terrible material like polyiso with a mycelium-based composites that we are making right now in a plant that is not appropriately set up for building materials, right? At the plant, we have a 20,000 square feet plant in Troy, New York, that's been set up for packaging. That's not set up for building materials. If a group of companies like that shows leadership and decides that not just for the immediate future, we're going to look at, how can we cost compete with the incumbent product, but they
mhm,
think of it as a demonstration to themselves and to the world of how can we actually get this carbon negative material implemented. I think that would be a massive first step, and each and every one of these companies that are involved have are completely invested in it, and they're amazing people to work with because they look at it from a longer term perspective. They're really showing leadership in how do you get this product out in the world, and how do we actually build a building with it. So yeah,
mhm.
it's very exciting.
That's awesome. What do you think is uh, behind that momentum shift coming up in the US?
I think there's definitely a lot more exposure in the press and in politics for the need of some real drastic measurements in terms of using more sustainable materials, especially in the construction industry.
Mhm,
And I think there's certainly certain incentives out there from local governments. Who allow companies to tap into certain funds to do that. This specific project, I don't believe, is focused on that, but there's definitely incentives out there in the market for people to use alternative materials. So I think that definitely will drive some of that more enthusiasm of companies to start looking at alternative materials.
mhm. Interesting. So
Yeah.
one of the kind of the key aspects of sustainable housing is obviously reducing the waste that is involved, which is plenty in the construction industry. How does this really help address the issue of reducing just construction waste in general? And what do you see as the long term implications for construction waste?
Yeah, I think the immediate difference, right, is our materials compostable. I mean, if you break up one of these core materials or these core panels that we are using there or our packaging, if you break it
Mm,
up and you throw it in your yard, 4 weeks later it's gone. It will have returned nutrients to the earth and it will have been composted. If it ends up in the ocean, I believe it will take about 180 days to marine compost. So, that right out of the gate is completely different than the 500 years that EPS foam takes to be, degraded in landfill. So
mhm,
there's, immediately a material aspect there where a mycelium-based product, or there's lots of other products out there, by the way, right? Like if you look at packaging, there's amazing innovations being done right now with seaweed, with shrimp shells, you name it. There's amazing products out in the market, and I think it's a really great movement that more people are looking at it. In the building sector, that's always difficult, right? Like people will go for cost and people will go for reliability,
mhm.
and so yeah, can you get a material in at small benchtop scale, a mock-up model? Sure, lots of people have done that. Not that hard to achieve because people want to be a part of it. They want to put it on their social media. They want to have that halo. Having it actually implemented in a building where people are going to live in, that's a different game. And yeah, looks like we're getting closer to
What role do you see the materials kind of playing in future building?
that. You mean sustainable materials?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I think from a carbon emissions perspective, as well as from an end of life perspective, the building and construction industry will have to look at different alternatives. Whether that's mycelium based or whether there's another product, is kind of the big question, right? And I think there's definitely still time for that to be figured out. But yeah, I do really see an uptick in importance in the near future for more sustainable materials. Consumers are demanding it. Governments are demanding it. Eventually, the people who are actually building these buildings will follow as well, and they'll see the advantage in it. Not just from a marketing perspective, right, which is a big part of the question today or a big part of the incentive today,
Hmm.
but they will also see other incentives, including just building better buildings that have the same lifespan as a traditional material building, but is a combination between traditional materials and innovative sustainable materials. So I really see that combination as a very important thing for the future.
Yeah. Where do you see the mycelium technology moving over the next couple of years?
I think mycelium still has a lot of things to give to us as humanity or as society, right? Like there's not it's not like we're scratching the surface. I think we're really getting to places with lots of different materials already out in the market, right? Including the plastic free leather and foam, things like food products and packaging and building materials. But balsa wood, for example, is another material that can be very well replaced by mycelium, and is
Mm.
something that we've looked at in the past, and is also an amazing material that we can potentially bring to market.
Yeah. Interesting. What does one of the core tenets of the podcast is around innovation? We love to spotlight innovation and kind of drill down deep into what that looks like for construction. What is innovation? What does that mean to you?
Innovation, to me, especially in the construction industry and in the packaging industry alike, really in the entire alternative materials space, to me means that you're actually bringing a real product to the market that makes a difference, right? Too many so-called sustainable materials out there today still have a lot of polyurethane and other plastics incorporated in them. I think if you're going to try to make a difference, you really need to come up with a material that is fully sustainable, right, and completely natural. Our leather and foam product, for example, is really revolutionizing, I think, where there's no plastic layer, there's no plastic mixed into the mycelium. And I think that those kind of things will actually really set the tone for innovation in that space, is really coming with a material that's different and that doesn't still use plastics, because plastic is an amazing material, right? It's just really bad for us, for the environment. And so I think if you really want to innovate, you should try to stay away from that and come up with a revolutionizing product rather than still using some of those old tricks that we've been used to for the past however many years.
Yeah. How do you get the word out there more to create that groundswell, to just even create the awareness and education that there are other products out there? And I think we all are aware that plastic isn't great, but how do we kind of get off of our dependence on plastics?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think a lot of that goes organically. There's a lot of universities who are putting a heightened focus on that. There's a lot of talk about it in the press, in politics. I think a lot of it is kind of organically growing the interest of this generation, right, who wants to make a difference. And we see it in, for example, Europe, with the number of licensing requests we get. And, on the back of that, we rolled out that patent. It's the same thing here in the United States and in Canada. People really are interested to make a difference. And so I think that will propel itself into a more significant industry. Right now, it's pretty small. But in the future, I have good hopes for the sustainable materials sector to grow and play an important role.
Yeah, cool. How do people find out more information on what you guys are doing at Ecovative or connect with you?
Yeah, go to ecovative.com. There's a lot of information on there. If people want to use the material and experiment with it, we have a website, grow.bio, for the American market, where they can order materials to experiment with at home. Or if you're based in Europe or anywhere else in the world, it's grown bio with an N at the end, where you can order those materials and start experimenting with it. Everyone's free to reach out and connect with me via email if they're interested to learn more about our open patent program or about licensing in other parts of the world. I'm always happy to reach out and connect with people and help them move forward.
Awesome. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry, what would you pick to innovate?
In the mycelium construction material space, or how is that question?
Yeah. Let's go in the building materials construction.
Yeah, let's look at the building and construction materials with mycelium-based materials. It goes back to what I said earlier. If I could snap my fingers, there would be someone who figures out how to really make these large, for example, insulation panels at scale, who have the same R value as incumbent materials and at a cost competitive price. I think that would be a massive game changer for the construction industry. And obviously, mycelium will play a really important role in that if someone figures out how to do that at scale. Mm-hmm. We are not focused on that today, but I think in the future there's definitely opportunities there on both sides of the ocean, really to innovate. And so I'm hopeful that the near future that will happen.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Thomas, thanks so much for taking the time. I think it's a super cool product, and what you guys are doing over there is awesome. So thanks for taking the time and explaining it some.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me, Todd, and I appreciate your time.